I'm Dan Nardi. I live in Normal. Been here for quite a few years and will remain here for the rest of my years, I'm sure. But to talk about Harold Greger is really, it's a treat in so many ways, because I had tremendous respect for him, and I miss him. I miss his two cohorts, Ken and who's right symbol. So I know you're editing.
Yeah, no worries.
We're just talking about it.
Harold Boyd.
Harold Boyd. Yeah, his two, close friends, Ken and Harold Boyd. It just was a fabulous time in my mind for me to be in school at that given time. The whole department was really strong at ISU, and one of my favorite classes, without a doubt, was Harold Greger's classes in arts history. Just really, really informative. I enjoyed so much the way Harold would present work with like an incredible collection of slides, and just really be able to talk very objectively about new work, and also be able to talk about it very personally and how he kind of gauged that work, or information about that artist that we're not going to see in a book or something. He really had such a broad understanding of all of it. And so there were two classes that he taught, and one was like a previous time that led up to the true modern art movement, maybe in the 40s and 50s in our country, especially in New York City. And then the earlier work, like around the turn of the century and on, which was just laid the groundwork for understanding so many things. Without a doubt that in and of itself, that those two classes just informed me in a way that I don't think I could have ever gotten the same kind of response by reading it in a book or seeing it on a program or something. That's when I really had not known Harold in a way of working with him as a professor and involving my work and having critiques with him at that point in time, because that had not yet occurred. When I was close to finishing my undergraduate work, or at least I think I was in the last semester of my undergraduate work, and I was thinking about what my next step would be. And I had a family, two daughters, young girls. Didn't really want to uproot the family and move to another place to go to a university to get an MFA. I ended up staying at ISU and did an MS, Master of Fine Arts. That last semester that I was in school, or as an undergraduate, my paintings were really starting to become almost meaningless to me. I didn't know where they were coming from. And it might sound just kind of crazy to say that, but I can remember that it just it wasn't working, and they were abstract. They were somewhat colorful. I would leave my studio one day, come in the next day, and hope that something had happened the day before that would really energize me, and that just wasn't occurring. And I really started to sense an issue of why does the painting that I'm working on start and stop with this canvas and this edge. And I think that I started to believe that there must be something more to what the work is about than just this almost like a blind kind of trial, just putting something out there and seeing how I respond to it. I really thought it is time to know what it is that I want. And I started leaning towards making work that was more object-oriented. And the work at that time, when I began, I think the very beginning of the MS program, I talked with, well, prior to that, I talked with Harold Greger about him being the chairman of my committee. I also had a really good friend in Rodney Carswell. And Rodney was a person that I related to in regard to his work, which I enjoyed quite a lot and had a lot of respect for. Whereas Harold's work was the exact opposite of my own. But he was so good at it. I mean, you had to just be quite amazed with it, and I never doubted that kind of thing. What made me want to get Harold involved in my personal work in that program was I had heard so many things about him that that were mixed, and a lot of the people, a lot of the students were almost intimidated by him and would have a hard time dealing with him because he was so bright and he had opinions and he had ways of just responding to what you're showing him and questioning all the things that needed to be questioned to give you a direction. And so there was that component kind of speaking on those terms, and I thought, this is the guy I want, because I'm really pretty unclear about where I'm going, but I knew I had the beginning of an idea that was going to carry me for a long time. Later, as it occurred, it actually did. So I started thinking about relationships in things. And one of the things that really stayed with me was such a simple kind of awakening, because I would walk from my home to the campus, it was only a few blocks away. And I started looking at concrete along the way. And what I was seeing was what it looked like just a series of objects, like on a sidewalk, paintings. But no, they're not a painting, they're concrete. And in some of that concrete, I see where over time there have been cracks that have formed and some erosion that's occurred. Then I started to really kind of think of some of these segments as really being so closely related to what I thought I wanted to take my work into. And so I did. I ended up constructing paintings that solved the problem of the edge, because sometimes the edge would be broken and it would all be referring back to this relationship that I've not talked about yet, but what it was what I saw in approaching this work was this relationship between man and nature. And so man creates something not really seen as anything other than serving the purpose of walking on a sidewalk as opposed to walking on the ground. but it has a certain character when it happens, and then it has another character after it's been there for a while. And the longer it's been there, the more nature has worked on it. And so this whole idea of what was inspiring me at that time was that these were just like compositions. And some of the earliest work that I did was pretty much just going after what I could do with wood, and most especially styrofoam and plaster and all kinds of things that really were taking me away from traditional painting. And so I was actually starting to construct, but I was dealing with the surface in a very physical way. And very, for the most part, experimental, and not having any kind of a background in carpentry or anything like that. I just really found that I was really constructing works. And later I would bring color back into it. I began with a lot of gray. And relate directly to some of these things. And I never stopped looking at concrete for the longest of time. I would also go to cemetery and start to look at certain things there of other materials, but related, but also were not taking so much of the shock with time. So time became another thing. I was really trying to think of a way to speak to time and timelessness throughout this work. So back to Harold. This was a really interesting relationship that we had. He was so supportive. I was doing something that he hadn't seen before. That inspired me quite a lot because he had seen a lot, knew quite a lot. There were things going on in the art world, especially the earthworks, which I was very interested in those, but my work was nowhere near what was the same sort of scale or whatever. But once again, as this relationship between man and nature, I didn't really have any particular artists that I was watching that closely. And of course, without the internet those years, some of the information wasn't really available, but I'd get bits and pieces of it and see something about some of that work. But what it was with Harold, which I just couldn't have appreciated it more, was that he was, we talked about it, and we talked about a lot of things, but we talked about, well, is this still painting? And he didn't have a problem with that. He said, one thing in some ways leads to another, and he was interested in pretty much the spirit behind it, and I think the chance taking that was going on with it. I just really couldn't have had somebody like him, I don't know, looking over my shoulder and being positive. I mean, he would question things. I wouldn't for a minute begin to say he wouldn't question, but they were the right questions. And one of my favorite memories with Harold was when it came time. My program lasted 3 semesters in the MS. So by the third semester, things were really moving very well. And I was working on what would be involved in my thesis show. And then there was the thesis itself. And so that is where Harold and I couldn't agree. which was an interesting turn in the whole thing. And some of it just had to do with, I had a certain way of thinking about what I wanted to talk about in writing a thesis paper. And Harold had a very specific way of what he considered to be appropriate to do that. And in the end, we got into kind of a debate about it because he had said it really should refer back to people who had left, you know, a mark on my approach and my thinking, who kind of served as models to follow. But I didn't want to do that because I didn't really have, that wasn't a part of what I had done. That I was aware of certain things, but I had no individuals or even any certain kind of movement in mind. And I just didn't feel that it was sort of almost correct or honest to speak to that after the fact. So the fact was that I'm not thinking about that. You know, the work was kind of informing itself. And so he wanted me to give him an outline of the paper. And my outline was handwritten. It's about 6 pages. And it basically was talking about those things in a way of why I don't need to write a paper like that, which got a phone call from Harold. A few days later, I dropped it off at his office. I was at home with my youngest, or our youngest daughter, Sarah, at that time. She's only 4 months old, so I'm babysitting her. And Harold comes to the house to talk about these things, you know. And we sit at the kitchen table, and he unfolds some paperwork, and there's my 6 pages with an incredible amount of red on every page. And the only thing that had any more red on it was Harold's face. I mean, he really was upset with me. And so it was a fabulous meeting. We got through it. We talked quite a lot at length about his concerns and my concerns. And in the end, and this is the way it did end, he said, "Well, do you have an idea for anything else other than what you've given me? Because we can't use any of that. He said, you're going to have to find another way to present what you're talking about." He said, "Have you thought about that?" And I said, "Yeah, actually I have thought about that. And what I would like to do is not for this to be this one person speaking about the work and like say going back to talk about other people's influence or whatever. I said, what I would like to do is be interviewed. And my idea is that I want to interview myself. I know the questions that I want to put out there that I can respond to. I said, so I know this is really kind of an inside type of approach, but I think I can speak the clearest about it.
Okay, go ahead.
So he really perked up with that. He said, I'm not sure about that. He said, but I've never seen it. He said, so I kind of like that idea, but again, you're going to have to give me an outline. He said, and you know, I'm going to say go ahead with this, and then we'll go from there. And so yeah, the next time I saw my outline, there was no red on it. And he really, in my mind, just, I don't know, something special kind of formed between us, which never went away. He was very happy with the work that I showed, and with the interview to myself worked out, which was about 15 pages at that time, I think. And so I believe at that point I'm also just talking to him as Harold. And there was this friendship that lasted. I was still in grad school when I had a studio downtown and got to be around Harold and Ken Holder and Harold Boyd, and have coffee at this one place.
Shannon's?
What was it?
Shannon's, or it was something else?
But it was something else. Yeah, it was a lady's name. It was a small coffee shop. But between the three of them, they and over those years of my grad work, and then just being another artist in the neighborhood, that it just spoke volumes to me, of the support, the encouragement. I never had an actual class with any of those three guys, and some of them my best friends.